If you've seen The Conjuring, you definitely know Ed and Lorraine Warren. I mean, they're presented as these real-life heroes, right? This devout Catholic couple who risk it all to fight pure evil and save families. And it's an incredible story, one that has launched a whole billion-dollar movie universe.
But what if that story, the one we've all paid to see on the big screen, isn't the whole story? What if behind all the crucifixes and the Hollywood magic, there's a much darker, much more complicated reality? It's time to peel back some of those layers and see what was really going on when the camera stopped rolling.
For decades, Ed and Lorraine Warren were the faces of paranormal investigation in America. Seriously, if there was a big, spooky haunting on the news, you could pretty much bet they were going to show up. They weren't just some hobbyists. They were framed as the top experts in the field.
They wrote books. They were all over TV. They did lectures at colleges. They were everywhere. And their famous occult museum, the one filled with all those supposedly cursed objects, it became this legendary must-see place. They built this whole brand as protectors of the innocent, which all led up to The Conjuring films, locking in their legacy for a whole new generation.
But here's the thing. Even way before the movies, there were always these whispers of doubt following the Warrens, and it almost always came back to their most famous case, the Amityville Horror. For a lot of people, this is where that heroic image really started to crack. Okay, let's dive into this.
So when you look at the timeline for Amityville, it's pretty revealing. It all starts with a very real, very horrific tragedy, the DeFeo murders. No one disputes that. But what happened next, according to a key player, wasn't a haunting. It was a business meeting. The Lutz family, along with the lawyer for the murderer himself, Ronald DeFeo Jr., allegedly got together over some wine and invented the ghost story, specifically to make a ton of money from a book and a movie. And then the Warrens show up, throwing their credibility behind it and blasting the story out to the whole world. And look, this isn't just a rumor. This is a direct quote from Ronald DeFeo Jr. himself. He flat out said his own lawyer, William Weber, told him the plan was to hype up the story to get rich. So according to the man at the very center of it all, the motive was never about truth. It was about cash. Now, this is where it gets really wild. That terrifying green slime we see oozing from the walls, according to the lawyer, the inspiration for that was a spilled plate of spaghetti. What about the ancient sacred burial ground the house was supposedly on? The local tribe told reporters, no, there are zero records of any burials there. And the demonic voices that supposedly told DeFeo to kill his family? That was allegedly a legal strategy his lawyer made up for an insanity plea.
And the smoking gun, right? The most famous piece of evidence, that super creepy photo of a little ghost boy peeking out from the staircase. Well, today, a lot of investigators believe it's not a ghost at all. They think it's just one of the human investigators, a grown man with glasses, kneeling down, and the camera just caught him at a weird angle. With their biggest case looking more and more like fiction, the Warrens' credibility took a serious hit.
But, professional drama is one thing. In 2017, long after Ed Warren had passed away, a story came out that was far more personal, and honestly, deeply disturbing. It was a secret that had supposedly been kept for decades, right inside the walls of the Warrens' own home.
A woman named Judith Penney, whom most people only knew as the quiet lady who ran the occult museum, finally decided to speak out. And it turns out, she wasn't just some employee. She was an insider. She was there for almost every single major case the Warrens investigated. For years, she was that person in the background nobody ever really noticed. And boy, did she have a story to tell.
According to Judith, her relationship with the Warrens began when she was just 15 years old. Ed Warren, who was a delivery driver at the time, was 37. She says he met her at her high school and began a process of grooming that would basically change the entire course of her life.
The story Judith tells is just deeply unsettling. She claims that in 1963, she moved into an apartment the Warrens built just for her, right above their own house. But this wasn't an act of charity. She alleges she became Ed's girlfriend and that he would literally alternate nights between her room and his wife Lorraine's. This whole arrangement eventually got Judith arrested under this bizarre old Connecticut law that made it illegal for an unmarried minor to live with a married adult. She actually spent a night in jail for it.
And maybe the most shocking part of Judith's whole story is her claim that Lorraine Warren, the pious, protective, motherly figure we see in the movies, knew about the entire affair and did absolutely nothing to stop it. The only time Lorraine allegedly stepped in was when the secret was about to blow up the family business. So in 1978, right when Amityville fame was at its peak, Judith found out she was pregnant with Ed's child. She claims the Warrens came up with a cover story, that she'd been raped by some random intruder. When she refused to go along with the lie, she says Lorraine forced her to have an abortion to protect the family's public image and their very profitable brand.
After Ed died in 2006, Lorraine went into complete overdrive to protect their legacy and control exactly how their story was told. And this became crystal clear when Hollywood came knocking to make The Conjuring.
Lorraine actually served as a consultant on the films, and her contract had some really unusual and very, very specific demands. The filmmakers were legally forbidden from showing her or Ed involved in any crimes, but it gets way more specific than that. The contract explicitly banned any depiction of sex with minors, child pornography, or, and this is the big one, any mention of an extramarital affair.
And just in case you think that's normal legal stuff, it's not. As talent attorney Jill Smith told The Hollywood Reporter, this is not common in contracts at all. This just perfectly illustrates the incredible lengths Lorraine allegedly went to make sure the secrets Judith Penney would later tell would never, ever see the light of day.
So when you put it all together, you've got the huge questions around their most famous case, and then you have these devastating personal allegations. You just have to ask yourself, who were the real Ed and Lorraine Warren?
You know, Lorraine Warren always talked about being a devout Catholic, a true soldier for God. But when Judith Penney was asked about that, her response was simple and it was sharp. She just said, her real God is money. It's a statement that completely reframes their entire life's work, not as some spiritual mission, but as a very carefully managed business.
So you're left with this huge contrast. On one side, you have the legend we all know, the devout demonologists, the heroes fighting evil. And on the other, you have this really disturbing picture full of allegations of fraud, greed, abuse, and an obsession with media manipulation and making a profit. They're two completely different stories.
It really leaves us with a tough question. Were the Warrens genuine, maybe flawed believers whose work just got tangled up in controversy? Were they just brilliant salespeople who knew exactly how to package and sell fear to the masses? Or, as the most serious allegations suggest, was there something much, much darker hiding behind the ghost stories all along? That is the real mystery that the Conjuring movies will never show you.